Welcome TTB community. I am Elliot Shibley, and here with me, as always, is the humanitarian Bob Domeno.
Oh, thank you. All right, so today's guest is Emily, and she hiked the Wisconsin Ice Age National Scenic Trail, which is a 1,200-mile walk from Potawatomi State Park. I'm sure I butchered that.
That sounded great. That's how I would have said it.
Yeah, and so it was essentially from Lake Michigan into Minnesota. She did it in the middle of winter time. And again, if you know your geography, Michigan and Minnesota are quite cold in the winter time.
A little bit.
Yeah, she made history as the first known woman to cross the IAT during winter. Not only that, but as the first Black and gay person to make the journey through the coldest months of the year. It was an incredible conversation. She got into the planning aspect, to the mental fortitude that she had to have to complete the trip, to the physical aspects of the journey, to the relationship with the dog she brought with her. So great conversation, really cool hiking experience, and she was a great guest to have. Before we get into the conversation, the travel tip of the week is to map out your driving destinations on Google Maps before you go. And so what I mean by that is if you plan on traveling and driving specifically from one city to another city or one landmark to another landmark, obviously just put it in Google Maps and figure out how long those drives are going to take you. You can play around with the routes. You can go through tolls. You can go through, the scenic way, highways, whatever it is, but figure it out before you go so you can anticipate everything else. You know how much time you're going to spend in the car, and you know the approximate route. So if you want to be an efficient travel planner, this is kind of like 101 stuff. So definitely spend time doing that.
101.
Mm-hmm. The basics.
Yep. And before we get into the conversation, check out some of the stuff we offer. Support for the Traveler's Blueprint is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. God, I love that.
I love it.
Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, which is right here. This is the Lawnmower 4.0, and you did hear that right, is the 4.0. Join over 2 million men, including Bob and myself, worldwide, who trust Manscaped. With this exclusive offer for you, which is 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code TTB at manscaped.com.
So preparing for this, one term came to my mind, and that was nether regions. And it sort of set me down this wormhole of the word. I was curious, as a travel podcast, as a podcast that focuses on culture and geography, I was curious to know whether or not nether regions was related to the Netherlands, the country.
Is it?
So no, not really. So they share the prefix. Right. They share the word nether, which refers to a region at its lowest or furthest point or furthest part of a place, okay, especially with the allusion to hell or the underworld. Now, removing that second part or not thinking about it right now, you kind of understand how the Netherlands came to be because they're topographically at a low point right near the Rhine River basin. Mm-hmm. And now relating to the nether regions, it's a low point, I guess, of the body. And so there you go. You have some interesting information.
All right. Well, thank you for that insight, Bob.
Yeah.
And, we've traveled together, and I always thought I was a pretty hairy person, and Amanda can vouch for me. But in our time traveling together, I've learned that you probably are hairier than I am. And what is it like with this? I mean, I know I've loved it. I mean, it's got the light, it's got the ceramic blade. It just makes things so much easier.
so thanks for noticing my hairiness.
Absolutely.
And I've been a hair guy for a long time since, my teenage years. I grew hair pretty quickly. And since that time, I've been trying to figure out ways to keep it in check. I shave my chest, my back, my head, my beard, like everywhere, I like to keep it clean. And Manscaped sent us this and it's perfect. It's lightweight. The charge lasts forever. The light is one of my favorite aspects of this tool because I've been shaving for a long time and I've never had a light attached to the buzzer itself. So when you're shaving and you have this spotlight shining on you, you can actually see the differences in. Yeah, it makes it so much easier. It's such an incredible idea to add a light.
And simple.
And then again, as a traveler, it's perfect. You can throw it in your bag. The thing itself charges and lasts for a while, but then the wireless charging port is also charged and you can then use along your trips, making it for a pretty extended period of time where you don't have to worry about finding an outlet, which as a traveler, we know it doesn't always come around as often as we like.
And speaking of traveling, this has a travel lock on it, so you can actually prevent it from turning on while you're traveling, especially if you're throwing your bag around into an overhead compartment, onto a bus or
That's
a
big.
trunk.
That's big. Yeah.
Huge, huge.
Yeah, because how often I can't think of any specific items, but you shove your bag in somewhere just to get it on the plane or the bus.
Toothbrush, old
And yeah,
trimmers, all that stuff.
Exactly. You hear it
Such
go,
a
and you're like,
pain.
yeah, exactly. So that seems to be avoidable now with this new 4.0, the Lawnmower 4.0.
So again, you can get 20% off and free shipping by using code TTB at manscaped.com. That is 20% off with free worldwide shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code TTB. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for your family jewels with Manscaped. Your balls will thank you.
Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Emily, welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint podcast.
Thank you. Excited.
We're excited to have you on. You have quite the adventurous story that we're going to talk to you about today. You hiked through biked about 1,200 miles of a trail in Wisconsin, and we're excited to learn all about your trip, how you prepared, and actually what made you do it. Because you did this in the winter of 2020, like a month ago, or 2 months ago.
Yeah, I know. I've been home for a while now, so it's kind of all being but a dream of the past.
Now, have you been reflecting upon that experience, and are you pulling anything out of it still that you've learned?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I feel like, there's like that instant unpacking that you do when you get back from any big trip or like any adventure that you have. And then you have like the more nuanced things that might be more meaningful later on as you start to like really begin to interact with the world and like view people and stuff. So yeah. Last night, my partner and I, we went out for like our very first like date night since I've been back. And we went out to like a country bar that we love. And I'm just like, wow, I have not observed people in such a situation in such a long time. It was so loud in there. It was crazy. We walked out of the bar and my partner is like shouting. And I was like, why are we shouting? It was so noisy in there. So there's a lot of things that are still like nuanced that are inside.
That's funny. Yeah, I think a lot of people will have that experience as the country starts to open back up. And what we've seen over the past years, most people, well, I don't know about most people, but a lot of people sought out refuge in the wilderness for their vacation times. And there was big influx in going camping and glamping and biking and all those good things. So it'll be funny as people now have those experiences. And I think a lot of people didn't have those natural experiences. They're going to go back to the modern, overpopulated world, and hopefully they get pulled back and they realize that they should take a break now that they were kind of forced to do so. So what's the name of this hiking trail? How did you find it? And then how did you eventually come to the idea that you thought, that you might end up actually hiking it?
Yeah, it's called the Ice Age Trail. And I first heard about it in the summer of 2019. I was out playing volleyball with a buddy, and I get laid off for the winter. I'm a gardener at a place called Glenshing here. I'm their head gardener. So I work 9 months out of the year, which is awesome. I
like a teacher, much. But in the winter off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Which is quite all right. Because I work outdoors and I love working outdoors in the nice weather. So I get laid off in the winter. I get December, January, and February off. And I knew that I could crank out at least 1,000 miles in 3 months. In 2 months, I was like, well, we'll give it a shot. And my buddy's like, well, have you thought about, she called it like the Glacial Trail or something like that. We had no idea what we were talking about. So I looked it up, and it was awesome because it's in the Midwest. It was nearby. And I just was like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. In entirety, it's 1,200 miles, but it is not a completed route. So when you kind of get to those roadwalks, you can choose your own adventure a little bit more, and find the path that best suits you for that day. Sometimes they'll take you on really windy backcountry roads if you're just not feeling it. You can take a highway situation, but those kind of get a little dangerous sometimes in the winter, especially with the plows.
So interesting. Okay, so it's 1,200.
Covered with snow at all ever?
No, I only got splashed a couple of times by water, but the plow guys, I think the plow guys and I had this somehow mystical understanding of each other. Like, I'm going to respect you and please don't kill me kind of situation.
That's all right. So you have this trail. Most of it is in the back country in the woods.
Kind of. So if you look at Wisconsin, I started out east, out in Sturgeon Bay.
Okay.
And from there, it heads south pretty close, like 60 miles away from Illinois. It's not very far from Illinois. So you kind of do that whole stretch. Then you come back up the middle. I call it the longest way across Wisconsin. You kind of hit the central region, past Madison up there, keep going further north. Then you hit kind of like north central. Then you start heading west. And in that north and like northwest section, that's when it's going to become really remote. Everything else kind of in there is just like, you're going through towns, you're going through a lot of small towns. I wouldn't call it backcountry. I would call it places where only a couple hundred people live. So it feels backcountry because nobody's there.
Yeah.
And have you ever explored that part of your home state before?
So I'm in Minnesota.
Yeah, Bob.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Have you ever explored that part of the state, these backcountry towns? Essentially, I'm asking, have you ever had experience with these towns that have several hundred people as their total population?
Only in Minnesota. We have a lot of small towns in Minnesota, but I'd never experienced little towns like that in Minnesota. There are a lot of boom and bust little towns over there. Lots and lots where like people came over from Russia, different other parts of Europe, and logged usually, and did something with forestry and like made a crap ton of money, and then it wasn't sustainable, and then it just died. But there are these little towns left over. So really cool like architecture as you go along, because it's like these like shamble homes that people live in, like these beautiful like brick buildings that like nobody lives in. I don't know why. I don't know. And then you just like kind of just dawdle on by, you're like, okay. And they did a bunch of farming too, those kind of old communities too. So they have a lot of cool like brick silos. I'd never seen like a handmade brick silo. Yeah. So
yeah, when I used to travel the country, I would go to these small towns, and it's really fascinating because it's especially in the Midwest, you have the former industrial operations, whether it's logging or steel or whatever we were manufacturing back then. All of the infrastructure is still standing, barely standing in some situations, but it is a cool little blast from the past. And then to see the people that kind of lingered behind and stayed in those towns and are doing whatever they can now. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool, especially living on the East Coast, where Philadelphia is 20 minutes away, New York City's 2 hours away. It's quite a different experience.
Yeah. It's kind of it's like a postage stamp of time. It's just it's crazy. But I loved it, and that was kind of one of those like, I don't know if it's like a niche thing about that trail or not, because I haven't done other trails like this. Other trails I've done have just always been like in the middle, way more backcountry, way more remote. And so when you're going through these small towns, they don't have postal services in these small towns. They like go to the bigger towns. Some of them don't even have bars. Some of them, like, you just don't even stop in these small towns. You just keep kind of chugging on through on these roads. And it's kind of like a wild experience, because you're like, I'm just like walking through these like little areas. And I always wondered, like, what do these people think about this like woman walking through in the middle of the winter, like this gigantic pack on her back and this crazy dog, like.
Yeah. Well, did the press ever get involved, or was there ever sort of any?
Yeah, they did. The local press found me several times. A couple papers, a dude from the radio, and then people back home also got involved. The Duluth News Tribune here followed me on my entire trail. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel caught me right at the beginning over in Wisconsin. So, yeah.
And I think I misspoke. I think I said that you threw bike, but you actually did hike.
Yes, I hiked.
Yeah, I don't know where I got the bike from, but did you have a sled at all?
I did. I had a Polk in the beginning, and I honestly did not know anything about this trail, and I was like, how hilly could it possibly be? And I was very wrong. There's a lot of glacial features that were left behind that are quite steep, and steep in all directions. And so I just came out to be better that I didn't pull it with. And with all the road walks, I made a little conversion set for my sled to throw some wheels on it so I could pull it on the road. but it just became more of a hassle than necessary.
How long did you?
Just my first week.
Just your first week, wow.
Yeah, so a little over 100 miles.
How many miles were you averaging per day? Right, it was about 70 days.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And I took 3 0 days, so anywhere between 15 and 20 miles a day.
Okay, that's pretty great.
Yeah. Did you
do in the
prepare
winter as well?
Yeah. That's
good if you're doing the Appalachian Trail like in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you prepare physically for this? Were like you working out? Were you pulling sleds and working those quads to get ready for it?
No, not as much.
That's what Bob would be doing.
Yeah.
Well, one ought to. So, if you are, I don't sit at a desk all day, right? So I have an advantage. I'm a laborer. My industry is I will forever be a laborer. I probably will never sit at a desk for hours upon hours until I'll work myself into the grave. I'll probably dig my own hole and call it good. So, like the working out aspect is that I'm fairly fit enough because of my job, my profession. I knew that road walking was going to be my biggest enemy. So I did a couple longer road walk practices before I left. Other things I practiced with was the dog that I borrowed, is that we did a couple shakedown trips together just to make sure that we got along, because she at that time was a piece of equipment and I didn't want that to not go well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I didn't work out anymore and the gyms were closed.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I do power lift now. I'm back at the gym now. I do power lift for fun. And that's just part of my weekly routine. But yeah.
2 questions. One, why was road walking your enemy?
It's so hard on your body, right? So when you're hiking on uneven terrain, you're using all these different muscles with every step you take. And not a single muscle is getting like repetitively just like pounded on. And with the pavement, it's just like pounding hard surface underneath your feet, same motion over and over and over again. Nothing is really flexing, nothing's really moving. You're just kind of dawdling forward. And it's really easy to get bored on road walks. So if it's not the physical, it's the mental.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I do not like road running. I much prefer running on a trail, biking on a trail. And then the second question is, so Zulu was the dog's name, right?
No, Zulu is my dog.
Zulu's your dog.
Yes, Zulu is a Catahoula mix, which means he's from the south. He does not do well in the winter. I borrowed a dog named Diggins, and she is a black Alaskan Husky. And so she was, and still is, because now she's mine. Spoiler alert, I own her now, which is pretty awesome. I knew that a sled dog was going to be a better fit for this. I've taken Zulu out winter camping before, and it's just miserable. He gets so cold and tries to sleep in the sleeping bag with me, and it's awful because he's too big now.
So why did you bring Diggins? What was the point of him on the trip?
Diggins is a female. She's named after our Olympic boss of a massive beast, Jessica Diggins. She's an Olympic cross-country skier from Akron, Minnesota.
Okay.
And is still crushing it even after Olympics. So, I always grew up with dogs, and just having a companion along is best. They keep you motivated, feels less isolated. You have somebody to talk to. And her nature is to pull. So when I was feeling sloggy, she could kind of kick me in the butt, be like, well, we got to get out of here, So, yeah.
How deep was the snow in some places?
Oh my God, like 2 feet, like up to my knees, like right at the bottom of my quad. Because so when I ditched my sled, I also ditched my snowshoes, which I know seems like a bad idea, but I didn't really hit deep snow until after I started heading north again. So it was over 500 miles in, I didn't need my snowshoes.
And then you ditch them, and then of course you need them.
Well, I ditched them way at the beginning, and you know what? Whatever. I grew up in Minnesota. I knew what I was getting myself into. We have deep snow over here too, and I say that now, but it was painful. Just like post holing and having wet boots, wet socks, wet pants, wet everything, just snow kind of getting in everywhere. So,
yeah. Did you ever run into a dangerous situation due to wet socks, wet shoes, just exhaustion?
There was only once was I really just didn't make a good decision. I decided not to de-layer during the day while I was hiking, and I pretty much had all my layers on, and I really should have de-layered. And I got into my camp that night, and all of my clothes were wet, all the way to my outer shells were soaked, actually, because I'd sweat so much. And some of those clothes I would try to double up for nighttime wear as well, just my like outer, like my puffy coat and my wind pants, because usually they weren't too wet, but I had sweat through all of them. And so I had to sleep, and it was one of the coldest nights. It was like -23, and I had to pretty much sleep with any other clothes I could find that were dry. And I woke up, and all of my clothes I wore the day before were like, I could stand them up, they were frozen.
Oh man.
And it was a dumb decision. I was just being so stubborn with myself, and I knew I should have de-layered that day, and I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I could squeeze my bicep, and like water would come out of my coat pretty much as I was hiking that day. And I knew it, and I was being dumb.
Just lazy, I guess. Just,
I never made that mistake again, though, for the rest of the trip.
Well, that begs the question now, did you ever do laundry on this trip, or did you have your set supplies and well, I guess you had to resupply for food, but did you use the same, I guess, equipment and clothing?
I did do laundry. Folks, when I stayed in folks' homes, they were super kind, and they let me do laundry in their place. But in my resupply boxes, I gave myself like new undergarments, new socks. But I wore the same pants, and pretty much my outfit never really changed, especially since I could wash them. But I did have backups if needed. Socks are the main thing that I like needed to make sure I had clean ones of, because dirty socks get cold very fast.
Yeah. Did you use primarily wool?
Oh yes, just wool.
Yeah,
wool's the best.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now that we kind of have the physical aspect of it, what was it like from a mental perspective? What were you thinking? Were there any hardships? Was there any sense of enlightenment? Just, bring us through your mental experience, your emotional experience.
Yeah, for sure. This is where I think Diggins really comes into play the most, of just like, I liken her to Wilson from Castaway.
I was going to say that when you were explaining who she was, like what she was to you, I was going to say she was kind of like your Wilson.
Yes, she was very much like my Wilson. And that's knowing that, she can't talk back. She can't understand fully. She has more emotions than a volleyball, thank goodness, and more. She does have blood running through her veins, so that's good. And a brain. So I made the decision, and this is one of the reasons why I like solo backpacking too. And I just made the decision, like the hard thoughts that came across my mind, that like things I needed to deal with, things that like I needed to tackle, like just in my own life, in my own heart, and just like forgiveness, like working through like all that gnarly stuff that we do as humans. Like I decided to like tackle on a lot of those things like head on this trip, and I knew I wanted to do that. And I did. So I would just like talk it out, like talk through it with Diggins and be like, here's the situation, here's what happened, and all that stuff. And then, so that was one aspect of it. And then there's the other aspect of just like, again, the mental game of like, it's winter, you're cold, you're rarely really ever happy because the sun's not always out all that often. If the sun is out, it's cold, because the insulation layer of the clouds go away. So you're kind of dealing with that. And then when you hit deep snow and start to just move like at a glacial pace, like it, my averaging could be like 2.5 to 3 miles an hour on a flat or like with good snow packed down. But like when I got into like 2 foot deep snow, is like a half a mile an hour pretty much. And that was like the mental game of like, I just want to get out of here so bad, but I can't get my body to move any faster. And that was tough for me to be like, I am my own limitation. And that's really that's kind of like what backpacking and solo backpacking is all about. Like, you are your own worst enemy. You are your own hero. You are your own limitation. You are your own accessibility. Like there's nobody else out there. Nobody's going to come lift me. And
yeah, right.
You know what I mean? This isn't,
there's no savior.
No.
So yeah, a few things with that. One, I love the talking through your issues. I try to do that. And I think that's what most people should do, right? Like if you're listening to this and you have things lingering in the back of their mind that are just kind of eating away at you, I think they'll most likely continue to eat away at you until you finally sit down and confront them and just sort of think them through write it out, do whatever you can. But in the situation you were in, Emily, where you're alone with a dog, you're in the wilderness, you can't be distracted by the millions of things people sitting in their home can be distracted with. You're really kind of forced to deal with it. It's a great opportunity to do that, and I'm glad to hear that you took advantage of it.
And I mean, and you can totally distract yourself out in the whatever you. I still think that you have to make an effort to really want to deal with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you'll be able to hike as far if you don't do it.
Yeah. Well, I think Bob and I had a conversation early on when we started the podcast with Florence Williams, and I don't know if you know the book The Nature Fix. And she essentially talks about how being in nature maybe 5 hours a month gives you that respite from all the daily life, but like actually being physically in nature, between the smells, the feelings, the sights, it actually lowers your cortisol levels and reduces your stress enough so that it lasts about a month. And you get those benefits. You have actually reduced risk of heart attack. Your stress levels are generally lower and you're more calm. And I think people don't appreciate that enough. And she actually put the science behind it, did like all those mobile EKGs or not the EKGs, whatever it is.
ECG?
ECG, yeah. Study of brain waves. Mm-hmm. It was just so cool. And you've done this a few times, but I think people don't do this enough and don't see the benefit enough. And you're probably familiar with this, but people that do these long through hikes, they get back and they get like the post-trail blues. Mm-hmm. Because they've had this, long time to reflect upon themselves, actually think and appreciate nature, but also have some solitude, and then they get done and they're like, well, now what am I working towards? Like, I just did this awesome thing and it's over and now I'm sad.
Yep.
But it's not just like I'm sad for myself, it's like an actual chemical sadness.
Yeah.
It's like postpartum depression.
It is. And there's no quick fix to it, really at all. Yeah, especially since because there's no substitute for hiking 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like because I agree with what Florence is saying. I mean, I'm sure she's extremely brilliant, and I'm the lay person who's practicing what she's talking about. She's the scientist, I'm just practicing what she's talking about. But there's no substitute really for that much chemical stimulation. And you kind of just have to like slowly work your way back into like just getting outside as much as you can.
You're like weaning off of it.
Yes.
And it's the type of chemical stimulation too, right? Because chemical stimulation, I feel like, that's everybody has to deal with that. But there's something about going and doing these hikes and you're kind of in control of your own time. You're managing your time. You have to think through every minute. And then you come back from that experience and you're thrown back into your job and your responsibilities. And now your time is being sectioned off and being pulled in different directions, and you have to deal with that. And so take those breaks and to kind of pull your time and make it your own and enjoy it and really deeply appreciate it is so important to be, I think, happy.
I think it's just a practice of being present also. Mm-hmm. Which I just don't think we don't, and I'm not shitting on anybody like for not being present. It's hard to be present in the way we live now. And, you really have to be mindful to be able to do it. And honestly, off the trail, I'm really bad at it. And I think that's why I love getting out and backpacking, because I'm really bad at practicing the things I want to practice in my day to day.
And it forces you to be present. Yeah. It's great.
I'm taking two sides of the social media. I think social media is great in that it gets us to connect with people that we don't get to connect with often.
It's how we found Emily here. It's how we found Emily.
It is how we found Emily. And the other side of it is social media can almost become an addiction, and it's been shown that it can be addictive. And people are, if you're at a table on a date with someone else, just someone else, and they go to the bathroom, typically the first thing that happens is you take your phone out and you just flip through notifications, you flip through articles, you go through Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, And there is no time to be present anymore because people have these other attractions or distractions that they can do whatever they want. And they're not thinking, they're not looking around, they're not being in the moment as we once were before this mobile digital age.
Yeah, and it comes back to what we were saying, I think it was before the show, about people watching and just living in those moments and enjoying the vibe associated with being around other human beings, being fun, doing fun things and eating and talking and just kind of enjoying and being present in sort of this bubble of just being human, and having that social monkey structure that we've come to know and love. Yeah,
there was an elementary kid. I stopped at a couple elementary schools on my trip, and I like left. It was just an open question answer situation. And this kid's like, "Do you ever get bored while you're hiking?" And I was like, "All the time, like totally all the time. I get bored. I'm walking for 8 hours a day. Of course I get bored, but it's so good to be bored.
It is,
and like we don't do it. I certainly don't do it in my normal life, and we should, because like from boredom, creativity really flows from boredom.
Absolutely. I think boredom is looked on so negatively, and it is such a good thing. It's something bad that we need to be, that teaches us to do good things.
Like think about like how creative you were when you, like, I don't know how old you guys are. I'm 28, so I was born in the 90s, and like boredom was like the pinnacle. Yeah, it was like the pinnacle of us getting into trouble, like building forts and like playing basketball, like all these different things. Like boredom stem from, so many cool things stem from our parents being like, please get out of the house and do anything but be here.
think about the long distance drive with your family where you were stuck in the back seat and you had to look out the window at the cars and just think. And that's sort of extinct. I mean, my daughter, better be prepared to look out that window. But like people you don't see it. It's just less common. And going back to what the boy said to you, do you ever get bored? Most people look at a hike and they automatically think of the physical challenges associated with it, but it's not. A hike like yours has an equally important mental challenge.
Yes.
And overcoming boredom and being alone and thinking through all these things is part of that challenge that you ultimately get to overcome once you complete the hike. Have you ever heard of David Goggins?
No.
Are you familiar with David Goggins? He's this, super tough ultra marathon runner. He's run like 248-mile marathons, crazy stuff. But part of it, he says like 80% of it is mental. And one of his little like quips is callous your mind.
Yes.
And I always love that, like saying callous your mind, because it is so important to, you need to have a hardened mind to achieve the physical aspect, right?
Well,
you need to go in with the right mentality.
David Goggins, I know Bob loves David Goggins. I think he brings him up almost every other episode. But
no, I don't. I haven't brought him up in a while.
Almost. Him and Tim Ferriss.
I do love Tim Ferriss.
But David Goggins' backstory was that he was really out of shape, and he used exercise as a way to get back into shape, but then found that exercise made him a better person in all aspects, and then used that mental ability to improve his life.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's exactly right. And I think that a lot of people quit things in general, but long hikes because the mental gets them before the physical.
Yeah.
Because our bodies will, if you are generally, you can even have whatever to say, it doesn't matter how your body is. Your body will adapt to your situation for however your body is shaped and however your body is wired. Mm-hmm. And it'll just do it the more you work it, right? But your brain gives you the option to tap out any second.
I know your brain's like, oh man, I'm doing this 1,000-mile hike over 7 weeks or 10 weeks, and you're a week in, your brain's like, this is hard, and your body's like, I'm good.
Your brain will come up with every excuse possible for you to give up. Like it'll just come up, anything it can.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so I think what you just said, Emily, is really important. We had a conversation with the Scottish woman who is, how old is Alice? 57?
Yeah, 57. Mm-hmm.
So she was doing all of these extreme marathons, hikes, bikes in her 50s. And
she even said, like, it is not a physical challenge as much as it's mental.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter. Oh man, it doesn't matter how many you've done.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I feel like that mental challenge will just always be there.
Yeah. So which one did you just let out?
Oh, both of them.
Well, which one was the last one? Was that Diggins or Zulu?
That was Zulu.
That was Zulu. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Diggins was giving me the signal. She's still learning about how to be a house dog. So she's giving me a signal that she needs to go outside. So I like to listen to what she's saying.
Yes, it's always good to listen to your dog when you have to go to bed.
Well, it's so funny because Zulu is he's always been very good at being. This is also really gross, but she's in heat right now, so we're also working through that, which is disgusting. But it's a house full of women, so it's fine. So sorry, everybody, for that image. Zulu has always had a really good bladder, and I think I've abused his good bladder. And now I have a normal dog that has a normal bladder. She needs to go outside a normal amount, and I'm like, God, you need to go outside so much.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a puppy now, and I don't know if you could hear her throughout most of the conversation earlier, but she needs to go out like every hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it is exhausting. I'm like,
Yeah.
you just were outside.
Yes.
And I know I have a grown dog as well that goes out like once in the morning and maybe once over lunch and then once in the evening.
Yep.
And that's it. I'm like,
Yep.
That's normal. More like her.
Your other dog will get there, and I'm sure Diggins will get there too. She's actually an incredible house dog for being a sled dog first. If you've ever spent time at other sled kennels, they're not made to be inside at all. You know, they spend their whole life outside. They fight they have a pecking order. They're like, they're an animal. They don't know where to go to the bathroom. They don't know not to eat things. They don't know whatever. So, but she's really
I went to Colorado and I did a dog sledding trip, and we went to the place to get the dogs and the sled, of course. And there was just dozens of these huskies all sleeping outside, curled up in little balls in the snow, happy as can be. And when we talked to the trainer, he said that they this is their life. Like, they need to pull the sled. This is what they look forward to. And I want to say he said like 6 miles a day they run, at least. Yeah, it was incredibly. Very, very impressive. The dogs were beautiful. It was so much fun.
Yes.
It was impressive. 6 miles is a lot. I mean, I take Amanda and my wife, take our dogs on trail runs every once in a while. Our older dog on trail runs. And she can do like 6 or 7, but more than that is a little too much for her.
Oh, that's crazy to hear. I feel like both Zulu and Diggins could go for miles and miles and miles and miles. And this is such a good. I like this. I'm gonna hop onto this little bandwagon. Right. Because for folks listening, not all dogs are meant to do trail work. And it can be very harmful to your pet if you take the wrong breed or the wrong type of dog on a trip. I specifically chose Diggins because this is her job. This is what she does when she does race. She's a racer. And so like she runs, 30, 40 miles a day when she's racing. So it's not that big of a deal. Like, she's with a team. This is what she does. And like, I chose her very specifically. Zulu, my other dog, I've taken on other trips, but his breed is extremely fit. They are bred for hunting large animals. He is mostly a muscle mass, and I knew he could handle it. So like, just not all animals, not all dogs are trail dogs. And I think that kind of gets goofed up because people are like, I'm going to bring my insert bad breed here on this long trip. And I'm like, oh, that's really not good for that dog.
Yeah. Well, and that is good to know, because I think like we specifically chose our dogs. We have 2 golden doodles, and I think they get really hot in the summers. I think they would do much better both of them are winter dogs by far. And in the summers, we have to either take them out in the morning on runs or in the late evenings when it's cooler. And they can't be outside for more than like 20 minutes or 30 minutes in the high heat, because they just get dehydrated and then start panting almost immediately.
Yeah. I'm super stoked now because I have a winter dog for adventures and I have a summer dog for adventures, which is super awesome.
That is. So I have a question. So your taste for hiking, like this wasn't your first really long through hike. Your first one was the Superior hiking trail, which was about 300 miles, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. This is the longest I've ever done. But I moved to Duluth. Oh gosh, let's see. I graduated from college in this winter of 2014. So I've been up here since 2014, winter of. Um, and like I knew when I moved here, like I wanted to get into backpacking. I think my first trip solo was like, I don't know, 30 miles over the course of like 4 days or something like that. Like I was less than 10 miles a day. Like my pack was super heavy and all this junk. Like I just had the worst stuff in my backpack. I had like glass jars. I had like a full cutlery set. I had like a gigantic pot. I had a 3-person tent. Like I had all this stuff.
just for you.
Just for me. I didn't even have a dog with me at that point. And it was miserable, but I loved it. And so I just kind of kept adding on miles and miles. And then I went, from 300 to 1,000, but whatever. Gotta make a jump sometime, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, it's just like the days are the same. It's just how long you're doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this next question, not necessarily even I think for this trip, but because you've spent so much time in nature, have you actually had any meaningful or awesome experiences with the nature itself, whether it's the vegetation or animals, anything like that?
Right. One of the things that's super awesome about spending so much time, and this is the difference between a weekend warrior backpacker, a week-long backpacker, and then like a long distance through hiker, is that when you're long distance through hiking, you really begin to understand the rhythm of animals outside of humans, right? So one thing that I began to understand is like there's a distinct difference between the sounds of day animals and the distinct sounds of night animals. And there's a time of day where they cross over and switch. And then the opposite again in the morning when they switch. And there's like distinct patterns of like where mice travel, because in the snow you can see rodent patterns. And that was amazing to see. You begin to understand how deer bed down together, like in the Chequamegon forest, which is in the north. There's these huge communities of deer beds. And it's just these piles of pretty much leaves where they dig out the snow and they must be like large dogs when they lay down, because they're exactly how you think a dog would dig itself a little kind of divot in the snow. And it's just a whole like, acres and acres of this in the forest. And it's just moments like that where you're like, one of the things that really hit me the most as I traveled was like, I can tell my evolution is outside of what I'm experiencing now. Even though whatever you believe about evolution, I suppose, I'm understanding that like I have evolved away from the wilderness, and I can I can feel that disconnect, that I'm a visitor in all these environments. I understand that I don't have sharp teeth. I don't have claws. I can't run that fast. My muscles have limitations, all these different things. My brain will block me from killing something outright, unlike an animal if it feels in danger and things like that. And so, I need tools to defend myself. I need these things to defend myself. And so just like walking through these territories of like different predators, I didn't see any predators aside from like raptors, so like birds. But even though I didn't see them, you could follow their tracks, and you could, Diggins, her ears would just like be going crazy if we were hiking at nighttime. She was so aware of like different predators that were probably watching us walk by. And it was that moment of being like, thank you for letting me be a visitor in your area. Like, I understand that. Yeah, this is like, I don't own this land. I just need to walk through real quick. So it was a lot of rhythms, learning just those rhythms of other animals, and then just like listening for it. There's a lot of sounds. I know people think that winter is very quiet, but nature is so loud. They never stop talking. I swear. Ever.
So the one thing that I want to bring up again though is, I get the disconnect that you felt with nature, especially seeing it and realizing that, we've obviously evolved, out of it. But then the fact that it was so gratifying to you to be in nature, to me, was you being sort of pulled back in, like, this is where you came from, this is where I came from. So we're not completely disconnected, because if we were, it wouldn't be so beneficial, it wouldn't be so meaningful of an experience.
It's like you just, whenever I'm backpacking, especially, it's just like, I know that me being out there, it's right. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. It's where I'm supposed to be. I can tell that I come from ancestors that like really had respect for this land and like these animals and how we, grew together with some of these animals and everything like that. And I it's part of the reason why I like bringing a dog with me, honestly, because it just like, yeah, everything just kind of meshes together.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot more sense.
It's very like pure feeling.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question on like Wisconsin in the winters. If it's anything like Pennsylvania in the winters, we have very short actual light hours. And it's not quite like northern Canada where it's dark all the time. But what were the actual like sunrise, sunset? Were you hiking like half in the day, half at night? Or was it still primarily mostly the day?
Mostly the day. I would, and that was another cool part, right? So I hiked through 2 different seasons. I hiked through winter and then started hiking in before spring. But I was hiking definitely into what we would call spring like. And when I started, the sun would be set pretty much by 4:30 p.m. And then when I finished, the sun would be done setting by 7.
Wow.
So like I really saw 7, 6:30. Like I saw that 2-hour change of like, I gained that many more hours of light. And that was like the most remarkable thing in the world. And I could just sense, like I would want to hike more, I'd want to hike longer. But I also really liked being in camp in the daylight, not having to use my headlamp to like see everything. So yeah, it was really crazy.
I was 30 years old, so like maybe a month ago or 2 months ago is when I learned that the period of the the equinoxes, so spring and fall, is when the days increase the fastest, like daylight, and it's like 10 to 12 minutes a day of extra light. So 6 minutes on either end is when the sun sets, and then when you get closer to the solstices is when the days decrease in how much they add light. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because I always thought it was constant between the solstices, but it's not.
Right.
It's really cool.
Yeah. We kind of go around the sun in ellipses.
Yeah.
So it's a goofy shape.
And with the tilt of the Earth's axis, it's so cool. Like that's what gives us our seasons, at least when we get above like the 30-degree latitude, we have actual seasons because of the difference in how much light reaches the Earth.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I love the Earth. I love geography.
Yeah.
Just so cool.
Yeah, I agree.
So I guess shifting away from the Earth, geography, nature, I'm curious about the people. I know that you spent time sleeping with people. People brought you into their homes.
Well, I slept in their houses. I never slept with them.
Yeah, that's a good clarification.
Sorry.
It has a different connotation.
So do you mind just telling us about some of those experiences?
Yeah. Well, and this was the remarkable part, is just like so many people hopped on this weird bandwagon, which I did not plan for. So like the way I planned my food and my shelter and everything was like, I was never going to ever see anybody ever again in my entire life. And it was really cool to actually see people. And I was really thankful that they let me stay with them. In some situations, there was just nowhere for me to stay. So even though in my itinerary, I had places set, I was silly. And I should have realized that campgrounds were going to be closed and they wouldn't even allow me. I called several. I'm like, I can't even just like sneak onto your property. They're like, no, we legally can't have you here because our water is shut off. And so I would, if I couldn't find a spot like dashed in the woods, I would like scroll through my Instagram and see if anybody connected with me from there, like through the county I was in. And I'd be like, do you mind picking me up somewhere? Like, can I sleep in your yard? Can I stay in your house? And when it got really cold, I mean, these people were awesome. They like shuttled me pretty much to the next day where I'd hike, and then they'd pick me up. And
that's great.
It was
really great.
it was really fun to like, and then see the ways that different families hung out with each other, because, um, COVID had been around for a while. So hanging out with other people's families that you don't know, strangers were a strange thing to encounter, I suppose, because we hadn't really done it in a long time. But it was so awesome because it was something that I missed, kind of seeing their habits and seeing their homes and questions they asked and how they interacted, and just like they were just really sweet people. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, COVID added a bit of a complexity to that whole situation, because being a stranger in someone else's home was odd to begin with, and then having COVID on top of it. Like walking down the street now, I just feel like I cross the street if someone's walking towards me.
I think that's weird personally, but I see, because here's the thing, and a lot of people might dump on me for this because I'm not a COVID conspiracy person, but there is definitely a mental there's a difference in your mentality, right? When you're just trying to stay alive and not be freezing cold all the time. And there's this trust you kind of have to have with people when they're like, and you ask them like, do you think you have COVID, blah, blah, blah. And, if the people who you're talking with talk about COVID as if it's an actual thing, I felt like I could trust them with what they're saying. I encountered people that were like, COVID doesn't exist. I'd be like, well, okay.
You probably have
it. And it's just like, but when you're cold and you're hungry and you don't have the luxuries of normal life, right? So this is kind of maybe going a different way. It's like a privilege thing. Like us in our homes, we have the privilege to stay in our homes and like be happy and healthy and whatever. When you're like out and about, either experiencing homelessness or pretending to be homeless because you're backpacking, like it's a different mentality at that point, and you're kind of just trying to survive. And so I risked it with a lot of families, and I was like, thank you for feeding me, thank you for letting me wash my clothes, like, and just kind of having that gratitude of like, I'm trusting you to not put me in harm's way in any shape or form. And as far as I know, I did not get COVID my entire trip. So
yeah, those are you made a lot of really good points that I don't really want to get into just because they would be a tangent and unrelated to the podcast. But I think it's important to consider other people's whatever they have going on in their life, their situation, prior to determining whether or not their opinions on COVID. It's kind of a weird privilege to be worried about COVID because it assumes a lot of other things are already in place. That's all. Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. And
that's the cool thing about backpacking, right? Like it gives you just perspective. It gives you perspective on other people because you meet. I met some very strange people on my trip, as you do when you're through hiking, if you're seeing people. But it gives you perspective on humans. It gives you perspective on the wilderness. It gives you perspective on just so many different things. And so I'm really thankful for that. It gives you perspective on yourself.
Yeah. That's probably the most important thing. Do you have any future hikes planned? Are you going to do the AT or the Continental Divide Trail? Anything in the future?
I don't have the time to do the big long hikes. Just because of my profession.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about splitting them up?
Oh man, I don't know if I could do that. I guess I could sit. I don't know if I were to do it, I would want to just like do the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
So for now, my plan is just to do kind of trails that are kind of unsung heroes that people don't really know about. Right. I do have the Oregon Desert Trail in my sights. I don't think I'll be doing it this winter. I want to kind of do some of the trails that I've already done up here closer to Canada, and I want to do those in the winter, and kind of tie them all together because they're really short trails. So I think I'm going to kind of sneak onto those ones. But yeah, kind of anything's possible, and one day when I can take time off from work or whatever, I will totally try to hit up all of the big three. But there's so many other little trails that people don't know about, so.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, where can people follow you? I'm sorry.
But I want to go this route first.
Okay. Let's go your route.
Because in CNN Traveler had done an interview with you, and they had talked to you about being a person of color outdoors, being in the LGBT community, and being a female. And even you said you check a lot of boxes. And what people have reached out to you saying different things. What has been the response from different groups?
I think people are just really excited. They're, growing up for myself personally, right? Um, I just never, the only other person I really saw like doing like athletic things was probably my dad. He's a long distance biker and he was a cyclist. And other than that, I didn't really see anybody else like me doing stuff, especially outdoors. And I'm just like, I've heard from, parents, a lot of parents in hopes that their kids kind of see this and catch on to this, and, giving hope to people just to, not be afraid while being outside. Because it's such a weird, I think I said this on, I think maybe Cripes Cast with Charlie Barons. And it's always an awkward thing where people are like, "Oh, it's so cool to see you out here," and I'm like, I know what they mean. Like, it's cool to see like a black person outside, and I'm like, do you say in my mind? I'm like, do you say that to your white friends? Like, "Oh, it's so cool to see you out here." Like, that's so weird.
Well, there is a stereotype that black people in general don't like the outdoors or don't camp.
Yeah, but whatever. Like, yeah, but I don't think that warrants you to point it out and be like,
no, I don't think it does either. But I don't know how true that stereotype is.
There's a lot of fear for a lot of people of color, right? Because historically, a lot of people were murdered and taken from their homes in the dark, and the wilderness wasn't quite a refuge. It was more of like people were forced to be outside because we have been laborers forever, and it wasn't labor that we chose. And so the outdoors was either a punishment place or a place where you were being taken away from and being forced to do something you didn't want to. And I think that's been passed down, to us through our ancestors and through stories and everything like that. And some people really still carry that weight in their hearts. However, more people of color are getting outside. And I think that I'm hoping brands, like, I'm hoping that they will continue to show people of color through their branding, because that's really will be helpful. Is that growing up, like, I didn't see any brands really show people of color outdoors. Right. And that's, like we're saying with social media, right? It's a tool, and promoting stuff is a tool. It's a job. It's a tool, right? There's people who do that for a living. And I think that's where we find the most comfort. Right? Like, think about cigarettes back in the day. Like, so many people smoked cigarettes because it looked cool. It was a cool thing to do. You saw all these people smoking cigarettes, and so therefore you did it. And the people you saw on the screens were white people smoking cigarettes, right? A bunch of white people smoke cigarettes. And if we see people who look like us doing something that looks cool, which backpacking I think is cool.
It's very cool.
A lot more people will want to do it. A lot more people of color will want to do it. It makes you feel safer that there's people on screens, there's people on billboards in magazines that look like you who are doing the thing that looks cool. So I think that we're starting to see the pendulum switch, go the opposite direction. And I'm hoping that the outdoors stays safe and it stays a sacred space enough for people to where that won't be abused. That's really what I'm hoping for, is that as more people get outside, it won't be abused. Because A, the outdoors is not for us to own, right? And B, the outdoors is for everybody. And I still believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think well, your experience, your publicity with this has really empowered a lot of Black women, Black individuals, LGBTQ, and just women in general. Because any of those boxes that you said you've ticked are great for everyone. Like, it's nice to see that like you said, it's nice to see yourself represented. And we've talked about that with many other people on this podcast. And if you get a chance, look up Jeanette Sehad, Jet Set with Jeanette. And she really focuses on getting people of color, getting underrepresented people represented in the travel industry and just in general.
Yeah, we had a whole conversation on it. And it really does come back down to representation. People will gravitate towards things that they can see themselves doing. And and relate to. And we've actually had a few podcasts on that now. Yeah, it really goes such a long way.
I think the same thing goes for, like, I think a lot of people don't think that Black people are farmers. There's so many Black people who are farmers, and they're really good at it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's, like you're saying, it's just getting the word out there, and we got to help. The whole thing is like, you got to help each other, man. Like, we got to do it together.
Yeah. I do think we are. I mean, it's hard to sort of get the big picture because everybody sort of lives in their own reality. But in our reality, and with what we've been doing with this podcast, we've now talked to people. We've had these conversations a bunch of times. And it makes me feel better seeing the industry shift in that direction. There are travel pages dedicated to Black travelers, and we've had, you know, women couples on the podcast. And so it makes me feel good seeing it be more inclusive because it's more fun that way.
Yeah. And Bob and I fully recognize that. I mean, we wanted to do this podcast way back in the day, and it took us maybe a few months or so to realize that we were two white guys doing a travel podcast and wanted to be more representative. And while we didn't choose to be two white guys, we understand the privilege that we've had growing up in this country, and we're trying to share your story and other stories of underrepresented people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm excited for the day where I can stop being an underrepresented person.
Yeah.
It's going to be an awesome day. I was talking to James Mills, who does Joy Trip Project, and we're like, man, one day it's just going to be so normal that it's not going to be that exciting when a Black woman doesn't see lights in the winter. That day is going to be super awesome. And you know what though? Like, I'm patient for it. It's not going to happen overnight. And like, it's cool to be part of, be a little drop in the ocean for this movement moving forward. And it just takes just the stories and just doing the thing and not being afraid and being a little crazy sometimes and just kind of getting out there,
Yeah. So where can people follow you for your journeys?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Emily on Trail. And right now you'll be seeing a lot of pictures of flowers because I am a gardener, and pictures of my dogs. But soon we will be back on the trail and it'll be awesome. Wait for the snow to start flying. We'll be there.
We're looking forward to it. Before we let you go, though, we have the rapid fire question round.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, we didn't tell you about this.
10 questions.
So, 10 questions, and then we'll round out the podcast. Elliot, do you want me to take it first, or do you want to go first? All right. Emily, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word travel?
Outside.
What home comfort do you miss the most while traveling?
My bed.
That has to be the most answered. If you could swim in any liquid, what would it be?
As long as it doesn't kill me, that non-Newtonian fluid.
Oh yeah, that stuff that's made of like cornstarch and water.
I feel like it would kill you first, though, because it would probably suck you in.
Yeah. You could scuba dive in that, or snorkel.
Yeah, maybe.
We could try.
All right, where are we? What travel book had the biggest influence in your life?
I'm a terrible reader. I don't know if there is one. Sorry.
Okay.
What about any movies? Social media?
What is there's one book that has sparked me recently. It's a very small, nobody knows about it. It's by a lady named Laurie Shepard. It's one of my childhood best friend's moms. She went in the wilderness in a little town called Jacobson and hand built her house with the logs pretty much around her home. And she still lives there till this day with her husband. And she talk about perseverance. If you read that book, I can't remember what it's called actually at this moment, but Laurie Shepard. It's crazy. She went through so many hardships to get that house. She actually lived in a little tent outside of her house while she was trying to build it. It was raining, it was cold and everything. So it was awesome.
Wow. I could see how you would relate to that.
Yes. She's a very cool lady.
Yeah. Say hello in your favorite language.
I don't know any other language. I did take German when I was in high school. So, hello, guten Tag.
There you go. Elliot knows German.
I know a little bit of German. I would say I know it. If you can travel with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would you choose?
Oh, probably I would love to travel with Julie Andrews.
Oh, nice.
That
would be really fun.
Just hanging out with Mary Poppins and just all day long. I feel like she would be. I feel like it'd be real classy for some reason.
Yeah, it'd just be songs all the time,
singing you songs as you walk the trail.
I'd be a-okay with that. Her voice is fantastic.
What is one item remaining on your bucket list?
Antarctica. I want to get to Antarctica so bad.
I do too.
Yeah,
That's it.
I do too. Yeah.
It's so hard to get there. Like, it's
I'm
easy.
working on
You
it.
just have to pay a lot, or you can do like
still
the
expensive.
the
Yeah.
postal service 6-month stays. Anyway, if you could pick an actor to play you in a movie, who would you choose?
Oh, I don't even know. I don't know. Probably somebody that played somebody that lived in Wakanda for sure. Just some like crazy warrior of some sort. If not, just an average looking person. If it's not going to be someone like super cool, just someone ultra average.
Who is the? It was the girl who was in Walking Dead.
Oh, she was awesome. Ramon or something was her name, or she was awesome. I don't know.
Who? I mean, who's it? Issa Rae. I mean, Issa and I don't really have much in common. I don't know, but she made Insecure. If you guys know who she is, but I think her eyebrows are so expressive, which runs in my family. I get a lot of comments on the above the eye. We do a lot with our eyebrows in our family, and she's so expressive. And I think that if she wasn't playing me, she'd play my sister for sure.
Nice. All right, I think it's me, right? If you were stuck in one city for the rest of your life, which city would you choose?
I mean, I do love Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know that's kind of cliche because it's my hometown, but there's a lot going on, and I love it here.
Understandable.
From what I understand of Minneapolis is that it's like the biking capital of the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's
not surprising, but that's amazing.
Yeah. Even in the winter, people get the big fat tires.
Lots of people do bike, yes.
It's cool. I've never been to Minneapolis. I've always wanted to check it out.
It's a good place to be.
And last question, what is one piece of advice you'd give to yourself 10 years ago?
Let's see. I'm 28 now, so I'd be 18. Oh my gosh. I was just going to college. You're gay. It's okay. I wasn't out yet. Go to college, go play rugby, and realize you're just like all those girls on your rugby team.
Oh, that's so funny.
Great advice. Oh, that's awesome.
So funny. All right, Emily, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast to talk about your trip.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So now I'm curious what other trails there are in the United States that we don't know about that are like, more long distance. Everybody knows about the Great Divide and the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, but I never heard of this trail until I saw the article on Emily.
Yeah. There is one trail I was talking with someone recently called the Long Trail. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So have you heard of Long Trail Brewery in Vermont? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's named after that. And I forget how long it is, but it's not as long as the AT, but it's still a multi-day trek that you have to do, maybe over the course of like 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of trails throughout the U.S. that you could probably do some overnight, maybe even a few weeks.
Yeah, there has to be, especially as you go into the Midwest and towards the West Coast. There has to be tons of them.
Yeah. And I think this conversation was really interesting, especially near the end of it when we talk about the accomplishment of it. And we've had many people on the show. We've had many guests. We've had travel and roundtables discussing, culture and minority representation in travel. And Emily's point is really accurate. Like, eventually it would be great to not even have to mention the fact that she was the first woman, first gay person, or first black person to do this during winter.
Yeah. Yeah. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
We are. All right. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please take a second to consider giving us a rating on iTunes, whatever you think we deserve. If you want to support us in a financial way, you can donate as little as $1 a month through Patreon, and it goes to all aspects of producing this show. Whatever you decide to do, we still love you. Thank you for being fans of the Traveler's Blueprint podcast.